My name is Linda Moore, and I was 65 when I finally realized how quiet a house can feel once laughter leaves it. For 40 years, I lived in a small brick home on the outskirts of Charlotte, North Carolina, with my husband, Robert. He was my partner, my anchor, the calm to my storms. We raised two children: Jason, our eldest, who was always logical and driven, and Olivia, our soft hearted daughter who never forgot to call, even on her busiest days. Life wasn't perfect, but it was ours. After Robert's passing, silence took over. The ticking of the wall clock became my only company. Every corner of that house whispered his absence: the empty chair at the dining table, his books left open beside the bed, his old coffee mug still sitting by the sink. My children visited often at first, checking on me, bringing groceries, staying for dinner. But as months turned into years, their visits grew shorter, their calls less frequent. Jason would always say, "Mum, you shouldn't live alone anymore. Come stay with us." I resisted for a long time. I didn't want to be a burden, and I loved that little house. It held every memory of Robert. But loneliness has a way of softening your defenses. The nights grew longer, and sometimes I'd wake up reaching for someone who wasn't there. One afternoon, Jason called again, his voice firm but gentle. "Mum, this isn't healthy. You need people around you. Come live with me and Melissa for a while." Melissa, my daughter-in-law, was polite, though we'd never been close. She worked as a real estate agent, always dressed perfectly, always in control. I told myself it would be fine. After all, it was family, and family, I believed, always found space for love. So I packed my essentials, some clothes, a few framed photos, and Robert's old wristwatch, and locked my house for what I thought was a short stay away. As the taxi drove me toward Jason's neighborhood, I looked at the city lights flickering through the car window. Charlotte looked different now. Faster, louder, almost unfamiliar. When we arrived, Jason hugged me tightly. "Welcome home, Mom," he said. I smiled, feeling warmth in my chest. Melissa greeted me at the door, her smile brief but present. "It's good to have you here," she said. That first night, I lay in the guest room, surrounded by new furniture and unfamiliar silence. The air smelled of lavender candles and expensive detergent. Everything looked perfect, almost too perfect. I told myself it was a fresh start, that this would be the next chapter of my life. I didn't know then that sometimes the walls of a beautiful home could hide cracks deeper than time itself. As I closed my eyes, I whispered to Robert's photo beside my bed, "I'm trying, love. I'm trying to belong again." The next morning, I woke up early, out of habit. Years of teaching had made me a morning person. The house was quiet, too quiet. I tiptoed into the kitchen and started making coffee. Melissa walked in, her heels clicking softly on the tiles. She looked surprised. "Oh, you didn't have to do that," she said, her tone polite but cool. "We usually use the espresso machine." I smiled. "Old habits," I said, pouring coffee into a mug. She nodded slightly and walked away. The scent of fresh coffee filled the air, but somehow it didn't feel comforting anymore. Jason joined us soon after, cheerful as ever. "Mum's the best at coffee," he said, taking a sip. Melissa smiled faintly, but didn't reply. We all sat for breakfast, the clinking of forks louder than our words. I tried to ask about their work, their son's school, anything to fill the silence. Melissa answered in short sentences. Jason scrolled through his phone between bites. That afternoon, I unpacked my bags. The guest room was tidy, almost sterile. Beige walls, white curtains, no sign of life. I placed Robert's photo on the bedside table and hung my cardigan on the chair. As I sat there, I felt a strange heaviness. I had expected warmth, chatter, the familiar chaos of family. Instead, everything felt rehearsed. as if I'd walked into someone else's carefully staged life. Melissa came by later and said, "Oh, please don't worry about the laundry or dishes. We have a cleaner for that." Her tone was kind, but something in her eyes said otherwise. That night, Jason knocked on my door and asked, "Mum, are you comfortable here?" I smiled. "Of course, dear." He hugged me good night, but as the door closed, I felt the space between us widen. The first few days went smoothly. I read books, watched TV, and helped their little boy with his homework. But I began to sense an invisible wall, a tension I couldn't name. When I'd enter a room, conversation often stopped. When I offered help, Melissa would say, "It's okay, I've got it." Yet, when I didn't offer, her silence carried disapproval. By the end of the week, I told myself it was just adjustment, that every home had its rhythm. I wanted to believe I'd find my place in theirs. But deep down, something told me this wasn't going to be easy. I tried to adapt. I really did. I reminded myself that Melissa ran a busy schedule, that Jason worked long hours, and that they were raising a child in a demanding world. I wanted to help, not interfere. So I started small, folding laundry, watering plants, tidying the kitchen counters. At first, no one said much. Then little comments started coming. "Oh, Linda, I like things arranged differently," Melissa would say, moving a vase I'd placed. Or, "Mum, Melissa prefers organic cleaners," Jason would add gently. None of it was harsh, but it slowly chipped at me. One evening, while setting the table, Melissa frowned. "You don't need to do that. I have my way of arranging things." Her voice was calm, but her eyes weren't. I apologized, sat quietly, and watched her realign the forks. Jason didn't notice. He was busy emailing from his phone. At night, when everyone slept, I'd walk to the balcony and sit alone. The cool air felt kinder than the house. I missed my small garden, my late-night tea, the freedom to be messy. The next morning, I made pancakes for breakfast, hoping to lighten the mood. Jason smiled. "Wow, Mom, just like old times?" But Melissa barely looked up from her laptop. A few days later, I overheard Melissa on the phone saying, "It's fine for now, but it's hard having someone else in the house." The words stung. I froze, pretending not to hear, and returned to my room quietly. That night, I cried softly into my pillow, hoping no one would hear. When Olivia called, I tried to sound cheerful. "Everything's fine, sweetheart," I said. "Jason and Melissa are taking good care of me." She didn't believe me, but she didn't press. Before hanging up, she said, "Mum, don't lose yourself trying to fit in." Her words lingered long after the call ended. Each passing day felt heavier. I began to sense that my presence, though tolerated, wasn't truly welcomed. The laughter I once brought into my home had no place here. Still, I smiled through it all, convincing myself that families go through phases, that love, no matter how strained, always finds a way back. By the third week, the tension had turned into routine. Melissa's politeness grew thinner, her smiles shorter. She began moving things I touched: the sugar jar, the kitchen towels, even the photos I placed on the living room shelf. "It just fits better this way," she'd say, and I'd nod quietly. Jason barely noticed. His long work hours became an excuse for emotional absence. Our conversations grew limited to short exchanges about dinner or errands. I missed the boy who once brought me flowers on Mother's Day without fail. One afternoon, I was reading by the window when Melissa walked in. "Could you please not use this room during the day?" "The light reflects on my computer screen," she said politely. I gathered my book, smiled, and left. That evening, I sat in my room and realized how invisible I had become in a house that was supposed to feel like family. The only real joy I found was with their little boy, Ethan. He would run to me after school shouting, "Grandma, story time." We'd sit on the couch, reading old fairy tales. His laughter filled the room, but even that began to bother Melissa. He needs to spend less time with screens and stories, she remarked one night, her tone sharp. I stopped reading aloud after that. The silence in the evenings grew heavy, almost suffocating. Jason, caught between his wife and me, never intervened. I told myself he was tired, that he didn't want conflict. But deep down I knew he was choosing peace over his mother's presence. The house looked perfect from the outside, clean, quiet, and modern. But behind those walls, love was fading into formality. I often sat in my room, holding Robert's old wristwatch, whispering, "You'd tell me to speak up, wouldn't you?" But I couldn't. I was too afraid of losing what little space I still had left. One Thursday evening, my phone rang. It was Olivia. Her voice carried warmth, that kind of warmth that only daughters have for their mothers. "Mom, how's everything?" "You sound tired lately," she asked gently. I smiled, though she couldn't see it. "Oh, you know me, always busy," I said. "Just helping out a little around here." "Helping out or doing everything?" she teased, sensing more than I wanted to admit. I laughed it off, but silence followed. Then she asked softly, "Are they treating you well, Mom?" That question lingered in the air. I wanted to say yes without hesitation, but my throat tightened. "They're fine, Liv," I whispered. "They just have their way of doing things." "It's different here," Olivia sighed. "Mum, you've spent your whole life taking care of people. You deserve peace, not tension." I tried to change the topic, asking about her work, her kids, anything to divert the conversation. Before hanging up, she said something that stayed with me. "Please don't lose yourself trying to stay where you're not seen." That night, I sat by the window, watching the city lights flicker across the skyline. Inside the house, laughter came faintly from the living room. Melissa's voice, Jason's laughter. I wasn't invited. For the first time, I realized how easily love can become selective. As I looked around my small room filled with neatly folded clothes and silent memories, I felt an ache in my chest that I couldn't name. I had given everything to my family: time, care, years of sacrifice. And yet, here I was, a guest in my own child's life. When I turned off the lamp and lay down, I whispered to myself, maybe this is what growing old means, watching love change its shape. But deep down, a part of me knew that something was about to shift. The silence that night felt heavier, like the calm before a storm I couldn't yet see. It happened on a quiet Sunday morning. Melissa was getting ready for an open house, rushing between rooms in her usual hurry. I was in the kitchen, preparing breakfast for everyone: scrambled eggs, toast, and orange juice. It was something I had always done on weekends for my family. When Melissa walked in, she stopped at the doorway. "Oh, you cooked?" she asked, her voice tight. I smiled, trying to ease her discomfort. "Yes, thought I'd surprise you all." "Jason used to love my Sunday breakfasts." She gave a quick, forced smile. "That's sweet, but I had plans to try a new recipe." "It's fine," though her tone was polite, but I could feel the irritation beneath. I quickly said, "I can help with cleanup after," hoping to soften the tension. Jason entered a moment later, kissed Melissa on the cheek, and sat at the table. "Smells amazing, Mom," he said cheerfully. I felt a flicker of warmth again, until I noticed Melissa's expression harden. She didn't say much during breakfast. Every fork scrape sounded like thunder in that silence. Later that day, while I was in my room reading, I overheard their voices through the thin walls. Melissa said sharply, "Jason, she's taking over everything. It's like this isn't even my house anymore." Jason replied quietly, "She's just trying to help, Mel." "You're overthinking." "I'm not," she said, her tone cold. This is stressful for me. I need space. My heart sank. I didn't want to overhear it. But once words are spoken, they can't be unheard. I sat there, staring at Robert's watch in my hand, feeling smaller than ever. That evening, Melissa, a part of me knew that something was about to shift. The silence that night felt heavier, like the calm before a storm I couldn't yet see. It happened on a quiet Sunday morning. Melissa was getting ready for an open house, rushing between rooms in her usual hurry. I was in the kitchen, preparing breakfast for everyone: scrambled eggs, toast, and orange juice. It was something I had always done on weekends for my family. When Melissa walked in, she stopped at the doorway. "Oh, you cooked?" she asked, her voice tight. I smiled, trying to ease her discomfort. "Yes, thought I'd surprise you all." Jason used to love my Sunday breakfasts. She gave a quick, forced smile. "That's sweet, but I had plans to try a new recipe." "It's fine," though. Her tone was polite, but I could feel the irritation beneath. I quickly said, "I can help with cleanup after," hoping to soften the tension. Jason entered a moment later, kissed Melissa on the cheek, and sat at the table. "Smells amazing, Mom," he said cheerfully. I felt a flicker of warmth again, until I noticed Melissa's expression harden. She didn't say much during breakfast. Every fork scrape sounded like thunder in that silence. Later that day, while I was in my room reading, I overheard their voices through the thin walls. Melissa said sharply, "Jason, she's taking over everything." "It's like this isn't even my house anymore." Jason replied quietly, "She's just trying to help, Mel." "You're overthinking." "I'm not," she said, her tone cold. "This is stressful for me. I need space." My heart sank. I didn't want to overhear it, but once words are spoken, they can't be unheard. I sat there, staring at Robert's watch in my hand, feeling smaller than ever. That evening, Jason tried to protest, but I stopped him. "I'll be fine. I don't want to cause trouble." That night, I couldn't sleep. The walls felt tighter than ever. It was in that silence I realized I wasn't living there. I was merely existing there, tolerated, but not wanted. The next week, Olivia arrived unannounced. When I opened the door, her eyes softened at the sight of me. "Mom," she whispered, pulling me into a hug. I didn't realize how much I'd needed that warmth until that moment. Melissa's face tightened slightly when she saw Olivia. "Oh, I didn't know you were coming," she said, her tone falsely cheerful. Olivia smiled back. "I thought Mom could use some company." Throughout the day, Olivia stayed close to me. We cooked together, laughed, and shared old memories. Jason seemed relieved, happy to see me smiling again. But Melissa remained distant, scrolling through her phone or stepping out for calls. Later, when Olivia went to the kitchen, I overheard her whisper to Jason, "She looks exhausted. What's going on here?" Jason sighed, rubbing his temples. "It's complicated, Liv." "Melissa and Mom just clash." Olivia's voice hardened. "That's not clashing, Jason. That's disrespect." The tension grew as the day went on. That evening, when Olivia and I were having tea, Melissa entered and said, "I think it's getting crowded in here. Don't you?" Olivia looked up sharply. "Crowded?" "It's your husband's mother, Melissa." Melissa didn't respond. She simply left the room. Jason tried to smooth things over, but the discomfort was already out in the open. When Olivia was leaving the next day, she hugged me tightly. "Mom, you don't deserve this," she whispered. "Come live with me." I smiled sadly. "Sweetheart, your apartment is small. I'll be fine." But as I watched her car disappear down the road, my heart knew the truth. I wasn't fine. Not even close. The breaking point came sooner than I expected. It was a Thursday evening. I was in the kitchen, heating soup, when Melissa came in. "Please don't use that pot," she said sharply. It's part of my set. I froze. I didn't realize, I said softly, placing the ladle down. She sighed, shaking her head. You don't realize a lot of things, Linda. I appreciate your effort, but it's hard living like this. Jason entered, sensing the tension. What's going on? He asked. Melissa turned to him. Your mother doesn't respect boundaries. I've asked her repeatedly to let me handle the kitchen, but she keeps taking over. I felt my face burn. Jason, I was just making soup. Melissa interrupted, her voice rising. It's not about soup. It's about space. This is our home, and I'm tired of feeling like a guest in it. The silence that followed was suffocating. Jason rubbed his forehead, torn between us. Finally, he said softly, Mum, maybe it's best if we give each other some space for a while. Those words shattered me. I nodded slowly, blinking back tears. Of course, I whispered. I'll go back to my house for some time. Melissa didn't respond. Jason looked at me helplessly, guilt clouding his face. I walked to my room, closed the door, and sat on the edge of the bed, staring at Robert's photo. I tried, love. I whispered. I really tried. That night, I packed my suitcase quietly. Every fold of fabric felt like a memory I was leaving behind. The next morning, Jason helped load my bags into the car. He looked drained, his eyes heavy with regret. Mom, I'm sorry, he said quietly. I didn't want it to end like this. I smiled faintly. It's all right, Jason. Sometimes peace means letting go. Melissa stood by the door, her arms crossed. Take care, Linda, she said curtly. I nodded. No anger, no bitterness, just quiet acceptance. As the car drove toward my old neighborhood, I watched the city fade into the distance. The moment I saw my little brick house again, tears welled up. It was dusty, cold, and empty, but it was mine. When I unlocked the door, the air smelled stale, but it also carried a strange comfort. I walked inside, touching the familiar furniture, the photos, the memories that still lingered in every corner. I set my bag down and whispered, I'm home. That evening, I made tea and sat on the porch as the sun dipped behind the trees. For the first time in months, I felt calm. The silence didn't hurt anymore. It felt peaceful. I didn't know what lay ahead, whether my children would visit or call, but I knew one thing. I had found myself again. I turned to Robert's picture on the wall and said softly, maybe love changes shape, but it never disappears completely. It just waits for us to come back home. The following week felt quiet, almost too quiet. Days slipped by as I cleaned the house and sorted old letters. One afternoon, while watering my small garden, I heard someone call my name. It was Rachel, my former student from nearly 20 years ago. She looked surprised and delighted to see me. Mrs. Moore? I can't believe it's really you, she said, rushing over for a hug. I laughed softly. Rachel, it's been ages. How are you, dear? We sat on the porch catching up. She told me she now worked for the local library, running community events and senior programs. When I mentioned I'd been feeling a little lost since retirement, her eyes lit up. Then you're exactly who we need. We're starting a small reading group for seniors at the community centre, but we don't have anyone experienced enough to run it. I hesitated. Oh, Rachel, I don't know. It's been a while since I've taught. She smiled warmly. Once a teacher, always a teacher. Come on, Mrs. Moore. You'll love it. Something inside me stirred, a spark I hadn't felt in months. I agreed to visit once, just to see. That weekend, I attended the first meeting. A few seniors sat in folding chairs, holding old paperbacks. They looked uncertain, much like I felt. I introduced myself shyly, shared a few lines from To Kill a Mockingbird, and asked them what stories made them feel alive. Slowly, laughter and conversation filled the room. One woman said, "No one ever asked me that before." Another man shared how reading helped him through his wife's illness. By the end of that hour, the group felt like a family, gentle, broken, but hopeful. When I left the center that day, my heart was lighter. I realized something simple yet powerful. I may have lost a place in my son's house, but I had found a place where I belonged. Weeks passed, and the reading group blossomed into something bigger. People began donating books, bringing snacks, and inviting friends. Rachel and I decided to give it a name: The Second Chapter. We turned an unused corner of the library into a cozy space with mismatched chairs, soft lamps, and shelves filled with well-loved novels. I spent my mornings there, guiding discussions, reading poetry aloud, and sometimes just listening to people's stories. One afternoon, as I finished tidying up, a local reporter stopped by. He was doing a feature on community programs. After hearing how the second chapter started, he asked to take my photo. "It's beautiful," he said, "how you turned loneliness into connection." When the article came out, strangers began visiting. Elderly couples, widows, even young students came to read or talk. Some stayed to help organize the books. Others just came to listen. I began keeping a notebook of their stories. Small, simple tales of loss and hope. Every page reminded me that healing doesn't always happen at home. Sometimes it happens in unexpected corners of the world, among strangers who understand your silence. One day, Rachel said, "Mrs. Moore, you've created something special here." I smiled and replied, "No, dear. We created it together." That night, as I walked home under the golden glow of the streetlights, I thought of Jason. I wondered if he knew how peaceful my days had become. I didn't miss the tension, the criticism, or the loneliness of that house. I missed my son, but not the version of him who had let me go so easily. It was late autumn when the unexpected happened. I was shelving books one afternoon when Rachel came in quietly. "Mrs. Moore," she said softly, "there's someone here to see you." I turned and froze. Jason stood at the doorway, holding a bouquet of white lilies, my favorite. His face looked tired, older somehow. "Hi, Mom," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. I smiled gently, motioning him to sit. "Jason, it's been a while." He looked around the room, eyes landing on the cozy shelves and the soft lights. "You did all this?" he asked. I nodded. "It started small, but it's home now." He sat quietly for a moment, then said, "Melissa left. She took Ethan and moved in with her parents. I tried to fix things, but..." His voice broke. "I didn't realize how much I pushed you away until I had no one left." I placed my hand over his. "We all make mistakes, Jason. Some lessons come wrapped in pain." He looked up, tears welling in his eyes. "I don't deserve your kindness." "You're my son," I said softly. "Kindness isn't something you earn from a mother. It's something you carry in her heart, no matter what." We sat there for a long while, saying little. It was the first peaceful silence we had shared in years. When he finally stood to leave, he said, "Can I come again, Mum? Maybe help out here?" I smiled. "Of course. There's always room for you in the second chapter." As he walked out, I realized forgiveness isn't about forgetting. It's about choosing peace over pain. Jason began visiting every weekend. At first, he came quietly, stacking books and fixing shelves. Slowly, he began reading aloud during sessions, his deep voice filling the small library room. The other members adored him. Watching him with the seniors, laughing and listening, reminded me of the boy he once was, the one who used to help me carry groceries, who'd read bedtime stories to his little sister. One afternoon, after everyone left, Jason stayed back. "Mom," he said softly, "I don't know how to thank you." I looked at him and smiled. "You already have, Jason. You came back. He nodded, eyes glistening. You were right all along. Respect doesn't fade with age. I should have seen that sooner. We began having dinner together every Saturday. Sometimes Olivia joined via video call, teasing her brother for helping me in the library. There was laughter again, real and effortless. I didn't need grand apologies or promises. His presence was enough. Watching him rebuild himself was my quiet reward. When he told me Melissa had agreed to let Ethan visit on weekends, my heart swelled. The thought of reading stories to my grandson again made me tear up. Life had come full circle. Not perfect, but peaceful. And that was enough. Months passed, and the second chapter became a beloved part of the community. People often came just to talk, to find warmth in shared memories. Jason helped every week, and together we turned it into something lasting, a safe space for every soul that once felt forgotten. One evening, as the sun dipped below the trees, I sat by the window with my tea, watching the world turn gold. Jason was cleaning the shelves, humming softly. For the first time in years, my heart felt full, not because everything was fixed, but because I had finally accepted life as it was. I opened my notebook and began to write the closing lines of my own story. Love doesn't fade when people leave. It fades when we stop believing we deserve it. I once thought leaving my son's home meant losing everything, but it was the beginning of finding myself again. I closed the notebook and looked at Jason, who smiled at me from across the room. "You okay, Mom?" he asked. "Yes," I said, smiling back. For the first time, truly okay. That night, as I locked up the library and stepped into the cool air, I whispered to myself, respect doesn't fade with age. When others stop valuing you, it's time to value yourself. Moral. Life lesson. Respect doesn't fade with age. When others stop valuing you, it's time to value yourself. Walking away doesn't mean failure. It means strength, dignity, and the courage to begin your second chapter.